And honestly, politically, it would have been smarter for him to do that, and to include Hunter Biden as part of a mass clemency act than to single out his son. But it's done, and I approve it. But I I I was at a play, and at intermission I turned my phone back on and saw the pardon, and I was very happy.
Mhm.
I still feel that it was the right thing. Welcome back to Just the Facts with me, Jill Wine-Banks, the Watergate Girl. And today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited. I am being reunited with my co-host of the former show, iGen Politics, Victor Shi. Hi, Victor.
Hi, Jill. It's so great to see you again after, oh my gosh, what's felt like years, but it's only been a few months, I guess. But it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled, and I know that all of our listeners and viewers are going to be thrilled to learn what you were doing for the last, since April when you graduated from UCLA until the end of the election, very recently. And then we'll go on to talk about some hot issues. But first, let's fill in everybody about what you were doing, first in the Biden campaign and then when you stayed on with the Harris campaign.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about the two cycles that me and my colleagues were on, starting with the Biden campaign from April until July, and then the Harris campaign from July until November. Of course, the result isn't what I think any of us wanted it to be, but definitely has been an interesting experience. I have learned just a lot about campaigns and politics and how all these things work on the inside, and definitely grateful to have met a bunch of interesting people along the way. But my primary responsibility on the campaign was doing sort of youth engagement communications. So doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, helping with a lot of the forward facing materials when it comes to young people and young voters and all the like. And near the end of the campaign, I headed up this writers for Harris Walls call, which was interesting as well. But just all around, and then I guess in between there was also a convention. There were also events
Yes.
and rallies, and just crazy to think about how much went on in such a short period of time. But that's what's pretty amazing about campaigns, is that they start up in a pretty sort of slow way, and then all of a sudden come summer, things start to ramp up. And little did people know that, literally, I was in New York City when I found out that Biden dropped out and Harris would be the nominee. And then the next day, we all went back into the office, acted as if everything was normal, and continued with our work. And for the next 107 days, we just did everything we could to get Kamala Harris elected. And of course, there's some things that happened I think were really good, and of course we had a limited time, but other things that I think the Democratic Party can learn that I'm sure we'll talk about. But overall, a very interesting experience.
Yes, and I was very happy to be sharing some of it with you, both because we were both at the convention, but also because we were on phone calls often.
Yes.
And you didn't mention, but you were involved with Women for Harris, which is one of the things I got involved with. And you had a terrific person who was in charge of that. But let's focus more on the youth part, which was your original assignment, and whether you feel like the right news channels were used to reach that particular audience.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting sort of thing that the Democrats now, sort of in hindsight, should think about, because during the campaign there was so much going on, especially on TikTok, and our TikTok page grew from, like, it was 200,000 when Biden dropped out to, by the end, there were 2-3 million people following it. Every single video did really well, but I think there has to be a broader question of sort of not only where the channels are that we're engaging with, but also sort of where the information ecosystem is right now, which I think is predominantly in Republican control. And when you think about things like radio and podcasts and even state and local media, so much of it is being manipulated and harnessed by Republicans or Republican-leaning organizations that I don't think the Democrats have traditionally engaged in a sort of cohesive and unified manner. And so I think going forward, we're going to think a lot about where that happens, because when you look at sort of the turnout of this election and young people and who turned out for whom, it was for among young people, young men especially turned out for Republicans and voted for Trump. And when you look at the information they consume, it's not newspapers, it's not cable news, it's mostly podcasts and YouTube shows. And I think that's where sort of we fumbled a little bit and didn't quite get on those shows in a sort of aggressive enough manner to reach people where they are, to reach young men where they were. And I think sort of that is something that we have to think a lot about going forward. But I think what the campaign did in the sort of limited time it had was sort of all it could do. I mean, it tried to go on Alex Cooper with Call Her Daddy. It tried to go on Charlemagne the God. It tried to go on all of these different shows where people consume their information. But at the same time, I think it was hard for them to do because they also had to balance that with rallies and going around the country and stumping all across these different states and cities. And so it was a tough job. But I think next time when Democrats have more time and can sort of do more, I would hope that they can go where Republicans are in their media information ecosystem.
Well, I certainly hope that they will pay more attention, because the reason I asked the question is that I feel the message is great, maybe needs some crafting around the edges to make it more appealing. Our values are right, the democratic values are right, but it doesn't matter if it isn't heard by the right audience. And so a further question, though, is should the Democratic National Committee, or I don't know, other Democratic funded organizations create their own podcasts and try to build up the audience in the way that Joe Rogan has? Or is it better to just appear on those sources? You have Sinclair News controlling a lot of media outlets in a lot of important areas. Should Democratic candidates, like Gavin Newsom appears on Fox News and does very well, should more people be on Fox News and Joe Rogan from the Democratic Party, or should the Democratic Party create a Joe Rogan show of its
Yeah,
own?
there's been so much discussion about that post-election about how we need our sort of own media information ecosystem. But I think there's a challenge with that, which is that we don't have the donor sort of base that the Republicans do. So when you look at who funds a podcast like Joe Rogan's, or when you look at who funnels creators and influencers into a network like Charlie Kirk's or Ben Shapiro's, it's these rich billionaires who are able to do that. And we just don't have that sort of infrastructure quite yet. And so I think until we have that, it's going to be challenging to create our own sort of Joe Rogan or Republican type information ecosystem. But I do think it's really important for Democrats to do better and go to those shows where Republican viewers are. And when you look at a place like Joe Rogan, actually, his audience is really interesting. It's a third Democrat, a third Republican, a third independent. And so there are actually a lot of persuadables who are listening to those types of shows. But Democrats just have to do a better job of getting on those types of platforms. And I think something that's also worth remembering is that Joe Rogan actually supported Bernie Sanders in 2016. He was not always far right. It was this sort of, I think, evolution from 2016 where Republicans started going on those shows, or people with Republican sort of narratives started going on those shows and started to infuse those type of narratives in those shows and networks. And so I think it was a slow sort of buildup of Republican support among the Joe Rogan types, among the Lex Friedman, among Theo Vaughn, all these Republican-leaning folks who just didn't really hear much from Democrats. And so I think going into 2028, if Democrats really want to have a good chance of winning back that audience and winning back those type of shows, that we have to start going on those in a more aggressive way. You mentioned Gavin Newsom has done a really good job going on Fox. Pete Buttigieg has done a great job going on Fox as well.
Yeah.
But I think we need more Democrats and more candidates who are able to go on those shows and just start to be proud of who we are, be proud of the values that we represent, and also counterpunch Republicans where it hurts. And I think we have to go on those type of networks. We have to go on state and local media that are owned by Sinclair right now, and go on Fox News and meet people where they are, because I think there's a lot more persuadables listening to those than I think Democrats might realize at first.
I think that's great insight. And it's now based on real life experience in your first ever real job. You weren't an intern, you were an actual employee. And what did you learn that might be something you would share with other people about to start on their first job? People who might be graduating. next June, or even as you did, graduating a quarter early?
Oh boy, there's so much that I feel like I still haven't processed in this post-election phase. I went to LA for a few weeks just to decompress a little bit, but as I'm starting to think about from April until November, I think one of the biggest things is for any sort of job that young people are thinking of, or that, if you're a recent grad or if you're just about to graduate, really think about a lot. I think company culture really matters. I think bosses really matter a lot. I think finding right people in the workforce to be friends with is really important. I think there's so much of people think, well, it's a 9 to 5 job and afterwards, I can go out and enjoy the world. That's true. But I think also you spend so much of your time in the workforce and in the office that having friends and having people who you can lean on is so important. So finding those people early on, I think, is really awesome. And also just realizing, I mean, campaigns are a different sort of beast in the sense that
Yes.
there is a clear end date and it's so fast and there's so much that happens. But if you're just working a normal 9 to 5 job with normal job stability, it's going to be even more important to have that type of person who you can lean on and rely on. So thinking about that, and then just also thinking about, I think, sort of where your skills are and how to leverage those in the best way. And so I think, if you're good at writing, try to find as many writing opportunities as you can. If you're good at communication, try to lean into those. And you don't always have to sort of be stuck in one position or think that you're married to your position. I think you have more flexibility than you think, but it requires some conversations. And so I think those things are some of the most important lessons I've learned.
Wow, it's so good to hear that, because you and I've had many, many long phone calls, and I know I've shared with you about my experience at Motorola, which was a great culture to work in, and
Mm-hmm.
where we filled out a quarterly questionnaire that included a question about, I have a friend at work. And I always wondered what that meant and why that mattered until I left Motorola and went to Maytag, where I did not have many friends. Almost, I had maybe two. Whereas at Motorola, we all got along so well, and we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed brainstorming. It really does truly make a difference. And so I'm glad that you learned those lessons. They are really important to know what the culture of the place you go is. And so, speaking of going places, the campaign's over, you're out of work, and what are the things you are considering doing? What are your options?
Oh my gosh. Well, I joined thousands of people, literally. I mean, I wish it was a different scenario because it would have been a lot easier. But there's at least 3,000 people from the campaign and 4,000 people from the administration who are now
Wow.
basically jobless or hunting for job opportunities. And so it's a lot of people looking for very similar types of positions in DC and in the East Coast and all across the industry. So it's definitely been an interesting job hunting experience. But I'm considering a few things. I think campaigns definitely are interesting, and there's going to be a lot happening with 2025. There's some gubernatorial races, 2026 with midterms, and of course 2028. And there's a lot of candidates out there who are
Yeah.
thinking about running, who definitely might run. So definitely thinking about that route. And then of course, we've had many conversations about law school. So also thinking about maybe if there's nothing too immediate, starting to study for the LSAT and then maybe applying to law school. But keeping my options open, I think there's going to be a lot of movement happening post 2025. And I think once Trump gets inaugurated, there's going to be a lot of resistors and people who are going to throw their hat in the ring. And already there's a great race and battle that's happening for DNC chair between Ben Wickler and Ken Martin and Martin O'Malley and some other folks who are trying to sort of take back our party and build a better and stronger party.
Yeah.
So there's a lot out there, but it's just all there's many people looking as well.
Well, of course, we were lucky enough to have Ben Wickler as a guest on iGen Politics more than once, and
Yes,
he
yes,
is phenomenal. He's fabulous. But I would say
incredible.
any candidate who gets you would be very lucky, and any law school that gets you would be
Yeah.
very lucky. Any client who hires you, either for comms or for law, when you, if and when you graduate from law school, would be lucky. But let's move from this to, I'm wearing today's Jill's pin. I don't know if
Yes,
you
I
can
missed
see
the
it.
Jill's pin,
Is
the weekly
is
ones.
it's a circus. It's
Oh,
it's like a there's a Ferris wheel here that turns. Um, I Let me see if I can get close enough to the. Can you
I
see it
love it.
better?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's the Ferris wheel moving. Anyway, because right now there's a circus going on with nominees for the cabinet, with judicial vacancies, and other subjects as well. But let's start with those two. First, in terms of the cabinet, I know what and again, I'm doing the intergenerational thing. I know what my friends, my age, and even within 10 or 20 years of me, um, think. But I'm curious how concerned or how interested your peers are. I know you're super interested because you're you, but are other people even concerned about the possibility of Pam Bondi, of Tulsi Gabbard, of Kash Patel, of RFK Jr.? I mean, what are your peers thinking?
Yeah, the limited. I think mostly a lot of people are actually tuning a lot of this stuff out, and they're just choosing to ignore what's happening. But I think what's interesting about some of these people who Trump are nominating is that a lot of them actually have an interesting connection to young people. And when you think of people like Elon Musk, young people revere Elon and what he's been able to do for Tesla and SpaceX. But when I talk to young people about Elon Musk potentially heading up this new Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge, as they now call it. Young people are actually, the young people I talk to are actually really shocked that he would be leading a government organization that
Yeah.
he has no experience ever running. And so I think the prospect of someone like Elon Musk running a government agency is concerning for a lot of young people because he just doesn't have that experience. I think that sort of runs across the board. I mean, people like Pam Bondi, who you just said, Vivek Ramaswamy, you have people who just don't have experience running a government agency or running a government department. And I think young people, while they may not know who some of those people are, they do look at someone like RFK Jr. or Elon Musk, and they know them for they have a specific sort of model of who they are in their heads. And it's not someone who is in charge of a government agency like HHS or like Doge, as they call it now. So I think a lot of young people, while they don't know the sort of specifics of it, they are concerned broadly with those people who they once associated with these great entrepreneurs or these influential cultural figures now doing something a lot more serious and could have a lot more damage and consequence in their immediate lives. But oh my gosh, the cabinet positions that he's filling up are it's terrifying, and there doesn't seem to be a rock bottom, and he's not even close to being done with filling up those positions. And we'll have to see what happens with inside the administration and inside the White House, who ends up leading specific teams, but it does not look too great. And I think it's just this sort of flashback of all the chaos that we experienced from 2016 to 2020.
Well, let's talk about some specifics because Pam Bondi actually does have experience. She was the Attorney General of Florida, and that's a big. It's elected, and you're responsible to the people, and you do supervise. Nothing, of course, is as big as the Department of Justice. That's a huge law firm, so to speak. Um, but her public pronouncements are what concerns me. And Doge is not a department. It's
Yeah.
called department, which, by the way, I think is free advertising for Bitcoin. Because isn't there a Doge coin?
Yes, yes.
And yeah, so I mean, it's like, oh my God, he's getting free advertising out of this. This is ridiculous. Um, but yes, he's run big organizations. He runs Tesla. So his experience is not in government. And there is a huge difference between how you budget in government versus how you budget in a corporation. I've done both for the Attorney General of Illinois and for the American Bar Association, but also at Motorola. And so I know the difference, but I'm more concerned about public pronouncements about, for example, weaponizing the Department of Justice, having a revenge tour, having vengeance be the motivating principle. And um, I think actually that sort of relates to the question about the pardon, because I think one of the motivators for President Biden pardoning his son is that if he were sentenced and went to jail or got a lesser offense, a lesser punishment, which is quite likely given how the charges, how weak they were and how politically motivated they were. Um, if that had been it, I don't know that he would have pardoned. The
Yeah.
problem was that President elect Trump and his people who will be doing this are his former defense lawyers, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and they have all vowed to go after
Yeah.
the prosecutors who Donald Trump sees as his enemies, to go after the investigators, to go after the Biden family. And so it wouldn't have been over. It would have been a continuation of terrorizing the Biden family. And I
Yeah.
think that maybe was part of why he did it. What do you and your generation think about the righteousness of the pardon, and whether this opens the door for Donald Trump to do whatever he wants to do? And does that matter because he would have done it anyway?
And he would have pardoned, yep, exactly, a bunch of January Sixers and people who committed far more egregious crimes. And so
Yeah.
I think what Biden did yesterday was actually probably, like you said, it was more so, I think, of a protection of his son and what someone like Kash Patel would have done. And Kash Patel, I think, has openly said that he would go after someone like Hunter Biden in an administration. And so I'm actually glad that President Biden did what he did. But I think more broadly about pardons, I don't know how many young people that I've talked to have really followed the Hunter Biden case, but I know generally when it comes to pardons, I think there are a lot of people who are trying to push for pardons and doing pardons for a lot more sort of things that people should not have been charged for. And I think
Yes.
things like marijuana offenses, things like they couldn't pay off student loan debt. I mean, things that you should never have gone to jail just simply for doing it. And so I think a lot of people are hoping that President Biden will use his pardon power in these last few months before he leaves office for good. And that this is hopefully an indication of some good pardons to come. But I think a lot of young people are definitely thinking about sort of what justice means and what that pardon power can do for good, as opposed to what Trump would do with that pardon power, which is to benefit his political allies and to hurt his political enemies.
I'm working on an op-ed for U.S. News and World Report, and I make that exact point that I thought it was the right decision, that justice was served. And you and I may be uh, out in left field on this because a lot of commentators do not agree. They think it was a bad decision.
Yeah.
Um, but I said it's only a good start,
Yeah.
that he needs to do a mass pardon of people, for example, who are on death row. He
Yeah.
promised on his campaign website in 20 that he was going to work to get rid of the federal death penalty. Well, he didn't, but he could commute the sentences to life without parole or pardon. And that would be a mass clemency. That would be a good thing. He could take all the people who are serving much harsher punishments than our current laws allow, and that would be a mass pardon. And honestly, politically, it would have been smarter for him to do that, and to include Hunter Biden as part of a mass clemency act than to single out his son.
Yep.
But it's done, and I approve it. But I I I was at a play, and at intermission I turned my phone back on and saw the pardon, and I was very happy.
Mhm.
I still feel that it was the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, the commentators and the pundits out there who have been talking about this have definitely, I think, blown it way out of proportion, and there does seem to be this forgetting of the fact that Kash Patel and people who are going to be in this Trump administration have publicly said that they will go after Hunter Biden, and that seems to be a very important and crucial element that's missing in some of these conversations.
Right. Well, the biggest group that needs to get a mass pardon is basically every Democrat who worked in government. Unknown call. Sorry, everyone. I forgot to turn my phone off. I'm doing it now. Um, the biggest group is those people threatened with prosecution, investigation, just because they are perceived enemies of Donald Trump. And that, of course, includes Jack Smith and his team, but it goes way beyond that. You know, uh, Mark Milley, uh, I'm trying, Kinzinger and Cheney, even Hillary Clinton. I mean, they're still
Yeah.
talking about going after her, although I'm sort of think the statute of limitations has probably run on anything that they want to go after her for. But nonetheless, I hope the private bar will step up and do pro bono representation, because the cost of being investigated is enormous. And
Yeah.
this is unfair. It's one thing when you see a January 6th happen in front of your own eyes. You can't help but investigate that. That's righteous. And the people he's talking about were just doing their jobs, and they should not be prosecuted. That's why I'm, again, part of why I'm wearing a circus pin is because I think that these threats to journalists he's threatening, Politico in particular.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that your generation will get on this, because um, it's a totally unfettered pardon power that the Constitution gives to the president. And barring him taking a bribe for granting a pardon, it is unlimited and there's nothing that could be stopped. I think it would be much more important to have the right people in office to grant pardons rather than limiting the pardon power. Pardons are an act of grace and clemency, and I don't know that we need to change the constitutional power the president gets on that. Although I think you and I have talked about, are there some things you'd like to see changed in the Constitution?
Oh boy. I have always been a huge advocate for abolishing the Electoral College. I think that the Electoral College is a very archaic system. And actually, my first ever project in high school, or big project in high school, was about reforming the Electoral College. And I think that it's time that we do that. Sadly, of course, I don't think it's going to happen during these next 4 years. But hey, maybe it'll happen after that, or we can get something passed where it's something like the Electoral College. Oh no, sorry, not that. The Electoral Reform Act, or the one that basically set the compact.
The
Sorry.
National Compact,
Compact, yes, yes, yes.
National
The
Popular Vote Compact.
Compact, where we have enough states sign on to. I
Yeah.
think that there's almost enough states. We're still waiting on a few, and then hopefully we'll get to the necessary states needed. But I would love to see the Electoral College get abolished. I know you would like to see
Yes.
an Equal Rights Amendment get added to the
Yes, and I have a new theory, by the way,
Oh,
on
which
how to
is?
get that to happen. As you know, I was wishing that one of the last acts of President Biden or the first act of President Harris would be to order the archivist to publish it and make it a part of our Constitution.
Right.
I now think that the best hope for this is to get President Trump, when he's inaugurated, to ask Congress to pass a joint resolution. He will control Congress. They could pass a joint resolution saying that they are eliminating the time constraint that was in an extra part. It wasn't part of what the states voted on. I think it's irrelevant. But because we're before a Supreme Court that is less friendly to equality than maybe it should be, not maybe, then it should be for sure. Having the joint resolution get rid of the one argument that the opponents have maintained, which is that the time has expired for the ratification. If a joint resolution was passed under President Trump, he could get the credit. And I have long ago learned that if you want something done, you sometimes have to make bargains with people you wouldn't otherwise bargain with. And if it means giving credit to President Trump for passing the Equal Rights Amendment, I'm happy to do that. It's more important to me to have that be part of the Constitution than to have President Biden be the one who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping, and I don't think President-elect Trump is listening to us, but maybe someone's listening who has some connection to him, and maybe they would pass along this opportunity. He said he wanted to protect women, whether women wanted his help or not. Well, we do want his help for this. I want him to make the Equal Rights Amendment a part of our official Constitution. So that's my new goal. But I agree with you on the Electoral College. And just so that everyone listening understands what we were talking about, there is a statute that has been passed by many states, but not enough, that would make those states agree that they would cast their electoral votes for whoever won the national popular election. So whoever gets the popular vote, they're, even if he didn't win, he or she didn't win in their state, rather than casting for the winner of their state, they would cast the electoral votes from their state for the national winner. And that would eliminate the power of small states to control the outcomes in ways that are just not reasonable. And as you said, it's an outdated thing that was based on when communications were bad and when, the people weren't as educated as they are now. So I think it's a great solution, because of the reality that small states will not agree to abolish the electoral college.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's one other big issue is judicial vacancies. And there are at least 40 right now, 42, including courts of appeals, 2 court of appeal, 40 district courts. And we've seen the power of Judge Cannon and Kaczmarek making decisions that affect the nation and that affect the rule of law. And they are Trump appointees. And these are pending nominations, people who have been cleared by, through the proper FBI background checks, which Donald Trump is skipping for his cabinet appointees, but that's the wrong thing to do. And I would like to see a lot of effort from Senator Schumer and the Senate to confirm every pending nominee so that we don't go in with Donald Trump getting 42 easy nominations that his new Congress will pass quickly. What do you think?
I'm all for that. I mean, it's one of the biggest legacies of the Trump administration, one, which is he was able to confirm all these judges and justices across the, circuit and also on the Supreme Court. And many of them didn't even have basic qualifications. Some of them were denounced by the ABA as not being qualified.
Yes.
And so I think it's really important for both President Biden, but especially, like you said, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in these final months to get all of those confirmed. And I have to give, President Biden has been great when it comes to judicial nominations. I mean, he's confirmed, I think, around 200 or so
Yes.
folks so far. And a lot of them aren't just, your traditional judges, but also a lot of public defenders who are in those positions,
Yes.
a lot of people of color, a lot of, first transgender, first person who's openly gay. And so I think a lot of people are in those positions who never would have served in those positions if it weren't for a Biden administration. And so I think part of what his legacy should be is confirming the most amount of judges and justices in a single term. And I think he's already done that, at least compared to Biden, at least compared to Trump one and Obama one at this point of their first terms.
Yeah.
And so it's already been great, but in these last couple of months before January 21st and still more than a month he has left to do that, I think it's going to be really important for him.
Well, this is not on Biden. This is on Senator Schumer.
Schumer,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make clear that if you have a senator who isn't pushing for the confirmation of every pending judicial nominee, all of whom have been approved by the ABA and who are good candidates to be judges, please remember what Judge Cannon did. Please remember what Judge Kaczmarek did. Please remember what the Supreme Court has done. Now, there are no vacancies right now, and so that's not on the table. And Donald Trump has already appointed more people to the Supreme Court than most presidents, I think, in history. And if he gets any more, it will be a world record.
Yeah.
So a U.S. record, I guess. So I'm really hoping that anyone listening today will contact their representatives, their senators, because it's only the Senate that can confirm, and urge them to work late and weekends to get this done. It's one of the most important things that could happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's do that. So, okay, so we've covered we've covered pardons, we've covered cabinet appointments. That's the other thing is I hope your generation starts getting concerned and urging their senators to not just wildly confirm anyone who's put before them or to allow recess appointments. That would be a bad thing where they don't go through any clearance. Thank you, Brisby. He agrees. Um, we want to make sure that these people go through security clearances and through FBI background checks. And I actually think that President Biden could order the FBI to investigate these people, and he could, as an act of kindness, give senators the full FBI reports so that they don't vote for someone who has more and more things. For example, Hegseth, today, there are more issues about him being
Raised
drunk
by his
and
own mother.
well, yes, that's like yesterday's news.
Yeah, yes,
There's more
exactly.
news this morning
Yep.
from when he ran a veterans organization that he was frequently drunk on the job. I mean, I think these are serious things that need. I don't know the truth of this, but that's why they need to be investigated. That's why you need an independent FBI to do it. And I still remember when the FBI worked with the Department of Justice when as a prosecutor, I would get facts and then I would go to the FBI and say, please investigate whether this is true or not. It seems like they've become an independent agency on their own, and I don't know that that's a good thing. Certainly not under current leadership, it isn't.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another thing that needs to be reevaluated. And there's just so much going on. I'm so grateful that you are involved in helping to develop the future of our country because I know how thoughtful you are and smart. And I hope that you will be the leader of a group of young people caring enough to get involved in the issues right now: judicial vacancies, pardons, the Equal Rights Amendment, so many other issues, the climate, and having a climate denier involved in EPA or any of the other things, having vaccine deniers be in charge of vaccines. I mean, there are so many things for you and your generation to care about. I hope that you will keep at this and that our listeners will support you in doing that.
Oh, well, thank you. And I mean, it shows like this that are also so important now more than ever before, because I think one of the really important things that we're going to have to start doing for a lot of young people in our country is start telling them what the facts are and what civics is and how government actually works. And when we were talking about the pardon power, I was just thinking, how many young people probably don't even know what that is used for traditionally. And so I think educating the public, making sure that we tell people how government is actually supposed to work, who are the type of people who usually serve in these government posts and agencies, why having career officials is a good thing and not a bad thing, why what the usual separation is between these different branches of government is. I think there's so many different things that we can start really educating people on. So I know that you're going to continue to do that. And I know that's, I certainly will try my best, but there's so many people who are out there doing that and giving people that basic sort of civics education that I think is lacking in this country. And so that's going to be so important now as we sort of gear up for the second Trump administration and all the chaos and circus that's going to be transpiring over the next 4 years. We just have to make sure that we keep on telling the public that what this administration is about to do or will do is not normal. Not normal.
Well, I'm hoping that you've just given me an idea for another Just the Facts show, which would be to talk about maybe your old civics teacher, who I know you thought was terrific,
Yes.
and talk about what are the three most important things? What are the three branches of government and why should they be separate? Why should the president not control the Department of Justice? I mean, there's so many big issues going on now. I think maybe countering each action of Donald Trump to undo the rules and norms might be a good thing. So you're going to have to put me in touch with your
Yes,
civics teacher.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So thanks for joining me. Thanks to everyone for watching us. And I hope you'll come back next week for another episode of Just the Facts.